Let me tell you something that most people will never hear from their doctor. Not because it's secret, not because it's complicated, but because the medical system is built to treat what's already broken, not to prevent the break from happening in the first place. And what I'm about to tell you today is the kind of information that, if you had heard it 10 years ago, might have completely changed the trajectory of what's happening inside your legs right now. Blood clots in the lungs and strokes in the brain don't happen the way most people picture them. Most people imagine these things striking someone who's already visibly unwell, someone lying in a hospital bed, someone elderly and frail. But that's not the reality. The reality is that the people most at risk are the ones who got up this morning, made breakfast, sat in traffic, arrived at work, sat at their desk for 8 hours, drove home, sat on the sofa, and went to bed feeling completely fine. People who would describe themselves as healthy. People who would describe themselves as doing okay. People who have no idea that something inside their legs has been quietly building toward a catastrophe for years, possibly decades. And here's the part that makes this genuinely urgent. There are signs. There are signals your body is already sending you, right now today, that something is going wrong. Most people either don't notice them or they explain them away with reasons that feel logical but are completely wrong. So before we get into anything else, I want you to do something. I want you to actually check 3 things about yourself as we go through this, because by the end of the next few minutes, you may realize that the problem we're about to talk about is not something that might affect you someday in the future. It may be something that is already happening to you right now. The first thing I want you to check is something you can do without even standing up. Think about the last time you took off your socks or stockings at the end of the day. Not first thing in the morning, but at the end of a full working day. When you peeled that sock off, was there a mark left on your skin around the ankle? Not a slight impression that vanished immediately, but a real indentation with clear edges that held its shape for a minute or two or even longer. If you're not sure, take off a sock right now and look, because most people see this and they think, oh, these socks are too tight, I need to buy a better brand. But the sock didn't do that. Your body did. What you're looking at is edema, which is the medical word for tissue swelling caused by excess fluid that your body was unable to return to circulation. The fluid from your lower leg tried to make its way back up to your heart, and it couldn't. So it sat there, accumulated in the soft tissue of your ankle, and when the elastic of your sock pressed into it, it held that impression the way a finger holds an impression in dough. A truly healthy leg doesn't do this. On a truly healthy leg, you press the skin and it springs back immediately because the fluid is moving the way it should. When it holds a mark, when it holds it for even 60 seconds, that is your body telling you that something in the system that moves fluid out of your lower leg is not working properly. The second sign is one that a lot of people know about but almost universally misunderstand. Nighttime calf cramps. That experience of being asleep at 3 in the morning and being ripped out of sleep by an agonizing contraction in your calf muscle, the kind that makes you grab your leg and gasp and hold your breath while you wait for the muscle to finally release, which sometimes takes a full 2 or 3 minutes. If this has happened to you, you've almost certainly been told it's a magnesium deficiency. Maybe you've even bought magnesium supplements because of it. And look, magnesium does matter, and we'll come back to exactly how and why later in this video, but the magnesium story is only a small part of the truth, and stopping there, thinking that magnesium is the whole answer, is one of the reasons people take supplements for years and still keep getting cramps. What's actually happening is this. Your calf muscle has been working all day in a state of partial oxygen deprivation. The blood flow through it has been sluggish. The metabolic waste products that muscles produce during normal activity, things like lactic acid and carbon dioxide, haven't been flushed out efficiently because the circulation carrying them away has been too slow, too stagnant. By the time you lie down at night, that muscle is already in a biochemically stressed state. It's been quietly accumulating chemical signals that interfere with normal muscle relaxation. And at some point in the night, something tips it over the edge, and the muscle contracts involuntarily and can't let go. The magnesium deficiency is a contributing factor to how severe the cramp gets. But the underlying driver, the root of why this keeps happening, is stagnant blood flow in the calf. And stagnant blood flow in the calf has a very specific cause that we're going to get into in detail very shortly. The third sign is the one that people are most likely to dismiss entirely because it seems so minor, so ordinary, so easy to explain away. You've been sitting for an hour, at a desk, at a table, in a car, on a train. You stand up, and for the first 30 seconds to a minute, your legs feel strange. They feel heavy. They feel almost numb, like someone poured concrete into them while you weren't looking, or like they belong to someone else and you're borrowing them temporarily. And then it passes, and you forget it completely, because within a minute you're walking normally, and your brain has already moved on to whatever task is next. But this sensation is not nothing. This sensation is your body's way of telling you that after 1 hour of sitting, the blood in the deep veins of your calves had stagnated so thoroughly that when you stood up and the demands on your circulation suddenly changed, your legs genuinely couldn't respond normally for almost a full minute. That's not a minor inconvenience. That is a measurable, meaningful sign of impaired venous circulation in the lower limbs. Now count those 3 things. If 2 out of 3 describe your experience, you need to keep watching, because what we're about to talk about is not just about comfort or cosmetics. If all 3 describe you, then I want you to understand that the changes happening inside your veins are already past the early stage, and the time to act is not next month or after your next checkup. The time to act is today. But before we get to what to do, we need to understand what's actually happening, because that's the only way to understand why the things most people try don't work, and why the things I'm going to describe to you actually do. And to understand that, I need to tell you about something you almost certainly have never heard of, even though it has been understood by medical science since the middle of the 20th century. You don't have one heart. You have 2. The first heart is the obvious one, the one in your chest. It beats roughly 60 to 100 times a minute, every minute of every hour of your life, pumping oxygenated blood out through your arteries to every tissue in your body and pulling deoxygenated blood back through your veins to reoxygenate in the lungs. You know this heart. You've been told to protect this heart your entire life. But here's the thing about this heart that almost nobody talks about. It cannot, by itself, get blood from your feet back up to your chest. The physics simply don't allow it. The pressure your heart generates in the arteries is strong. It pushes blood out efficiently, all the way to the tips of your toes, against the resistance of miles of tiny blood vessels. But by the time that blood has completed its journey through the capillaries and arrives in the veins of your feet, that pressure is essentially gone. There's barely enough left to push the blood 2 or 3 centimeters. And you need to get it from the sole of your foot all the way up to the level of your heart, a vertical distance of roughly a meter against the constant downward pull of gravity. That requires a second pump, and that second pump is your calf. The calf muscle is not just for walking. It is, in the most literal physiological sense, a heart for the lower half of your body. The architecture of it is extraordinary when you understand it. The deep veins that carry blood out of your legs run directly through and around the calf muscle tissue. They're embedded in it. And those veins have valves, small muscular flaps spaced every few centimeters along the length of the vein, like a series of one-way gates. When your calf muscle contracts, it squeezes those veins from the outside with the same kind of action you use when you squeeze a tube of toothpaste. The blood inside gets pushed upward, past the next valve. That valve snaps shut behind the blood so it can't fall back down under gravity. The calf muscle relaxes. The empty section of vein below refills with fresh blood from the capillaries. The calf contracts again, pushes it up, the valve closes, the cycle repeats. Contraction, relaxation, pump, pump, pump. Every step you take, every time you rise onto your toes, every time your calf muscle goes through its full range of motion, this pump is doing critical work, moving blood from your feet toward your heart, keeping that circulation alive. The medical term for this is the musculovenous pump of the lower leg. Some researchers and clinicians call it the peripheral heart, and its discovery in the mid-20th century was genuinely significant because it explained so many things about venous disease that had previously been poorly understood. But despite being well-established science, it almost never comes up in the routine conversations people have with their doctors. It's not on the checklist at your annual physical. It's not what the poster on the waiting room wall is about. And that gap in communication between what medicine knows and what most people are ever told is part of why venous disease is so extraordinarily common and why it keeps getting worse in exactly the populations we'd expect. People who sit at desks, people who drive long distances, people whose daily lives demand hours of physical stillness. Here's what happens to your second heart over years of modern sedentary life. And I want you to really picture this because understanding the mechanism is what makes the solution make sense. When you sit in a chair, your calf muscle is essentially switched off. It's not contracting, it's not relaxing rhythmically, it's just resting passively on the seat of the chair. The pump is off. Blood in the deep veins of your lower legs stops moving. It pools, it stagnates, it sits there exactly the way water sits in a blocked drain. And the longer it sits, the more pressure builds up inside those veins. The valves, which are designed to manage the controlled flow of blood in small portions, suddenly find themselves having to hold up the full weight of a column of stagnant blood for an hour, for 2 hours, for 8 hours, day after day, year after year. Imagine what that does to those valves over time. Each valve leaflet is a delicate structure. It's designed for dynamic use, opening and closing thousands of times a day in response to the rhythm of muscle contraction. It's not designed to be a static load-bearing wall holding back a column of heavy liquid indefinitely. Under that sustained pressure, the leaflets begin to stretch. This doesn't happen overnight. It happens over months and years, imperceptibly slowly. A fraction of a millimeter here, another fraction there. But stretch enough, and eventually two leaflets that were once able to seal perfectly against each other can no longer quite meet in the middle. A tiny gap forms, and through that gap, blood begins to fall back down. Not all of it. Some still moves upward when the muscle does eventually contract, but a significant fraction, now constantly, falls back. This is venous reflux. This is the beginning of what most people eventually experience as varicose veins, as chronic leg heaviness, as evening swelling, as that visible blue-purple network of dilated vessels under the skin. But here's the thing. By the time any of that is visible, by the time any of it is bad enough to get diagnosed at a routine appointment, the process has been going on for years. The damage that's visible is old damage. The damage that's happening right now, at this moment, in the legs of someone who sits all day and hasn't thought about any of this, is invisible. It's accumulating silently, valve by valve, millimeter by millimeter, year by year. And now comes the part that makes this about more than just tired legs or visible veins. Visible. When blood stagnates in the deep veins of the leg for long periods, consistently, day after day, the conditions become favorable for clotting. Your blood is always in a delicate balance between its tendency to clot, which is life-saving when you cut yourself, and its tendency to stay fluid, which is necessary for it to keep circulating. Stagnant blood, blood sitting in a sluggish pool in a venous segment where the valves are failing, blood that is not being moved efficiently by a functioning pump, begins to tip that balance toward clotting. A small clot forms against the wall of the vein. At first it's tiny, and you feel nothing. You have no idea it's there. But it can grow. And if it grows large enough, or if it breaks free from the vein wall, it travels upstream through the venous system, through the pelvis, into the large veins of the abdomen, into the right side of the heart, and from there into the pulmonary arteries that supply blood to the lungs. A clot in the pulmonary artery is a pulmonary embolism. It is a medical emergency. Depending on its size, it can be immediately life-threatening because it blocks blood from reaching the lungs to pick up oxygen, and the heart, suddenly pumping against an obstruction, can go into failure within minutes. This is one of the most common causes of sudden, unexpected death in adults who had no prior known illness, people who were at work that morning, people who felt fine. And there is a second pathway that is less often discussed. In roughly 1 in 4 adults, there is a small opening in the wall between the two upper chambers of the heart, a remnant of fetal circulation that normally closes shortly after birth, but in a significant percentage of people never fully closes. This is called a patent foramen oval. Most people who have one live their entire lives without knowing it because, under normal circumstances, this opening causes no symptoms. But if a clot from the leg veins reaches the heart and passes through that opening rather than going into the pulmonary circulation, It enters the arterial side of the circulation. It can travel directly to the brain, and a clot in the brain is a stroke. This is not a theoretical risk. This is a documented, established pathway for cryptogenic stroke, which is the medical term for strokes that happen with no obvious identifiable cause in people who otherwise seemed healthy. The cause in many of these cases is a clot that started in a leg vein, traveled to the heart, passed through an opening the person didn't know they had, and ended up in the brain. I'm telling you all of this not to frighten you into paralysis, but to give you an accurate picture of what the stakes actually are. Because the difference between understanding this and not understanding it is the difference between taking the next part of this conversation seriously and dismissing it as another health tip that doesn't really apply to you. Now, I want to talk about all the things you've probably already tried or considered trying, and I want to be honest with you about what they actually do and don't do. Because one of the most frustrating things about trying to take care of your health is putting effort into something for months and getting no real result, and not understanding why. Let's start with raising your legs against the wall before bed. This has become enormously popular, plastered across social media and wellness blogs with promises about venous health and reducing varicose veins and draining the legs. And look, it's not nothing. When you lie on your back with your legs vertical against a wall, gravity does pull blood away from your feet toward your core. The stagnation in your lower leg does temporarily decrease. The mild swelling you've accumulated through the day does slightly reduce, and you may genuinely feel better for it. But here is the exact question to ask about any intervention. What does it do to the pump? What does it do to the actual mechanism that is responsible for the problem? And the answer in this case is absolutely nothing. You are lying still. Your calf muscle is relaxed. The musculovenous pump is not contracting, not working, not being trained, not strengthened, not improved in any way. The moment you stand up and walk to the kitchen, the fluid begins to reaccumulate. The pump is as weak as it was before, and within 15 minutes you're back to where you started. You haven't fixed anything. You've borrowed a few minutes of relief. And for people who have spent years doing this and nothing else, believing they were addressing their venous health, this is a genuinely difficult thing to hear. Because the effort was real, but the effect on the underlying problem was essentially zero. The same logic applies to foot massagers. The electric devices where you place your feet, and they vibrate and compress and release. They feel wonderful. They provide real temporary relief. But the massage machine is doing the work instead of your muscle. Your calf is passive. Your pump is idle. The device is handling the mechanical task that your musculovenous pump is supposed to be handling. And in doing so, it gives you the sensation of resolution without any of the physiological adaptation that would actually strengthen the pump over time. You are outsourcing the work of your second heart to a machine, and the machine does nothing to make your second heart stronger. 10,000 steps a day is a more complicated conversation, because unlike the legs up the wall position, walking does actually engage the calf muscle to some degree. The pump does work when you walk, but the key word is degree. When you walk at a casual pace on a flat surface, whether it's a supermarket floor, an office corridor, or a gentle stroll along a flat path, your foot rolls gently from heel to toe, your calf contracts partially, and your pump operates at somewhere around 20 to 30% of its actual capacity. This is enough to maintain basic circulation, enough to prevent the worst of the stagnation you'd get from sitting completely still. But it is nowhere near enough to compensate for 8 hours of near-complete pump inactivity, and it is nowhere near enough to rehabilitate a pump that has already been weakened by years of insufficient use. The comparison I find most useful is thinking about someone trying to inflate a completely flat tire with a pump that they only push down halfway. Air does enter the tire with each half push, but the tire loses air through the valve faster than it gains it from the inadequate pumping. You need to push the pump all the way down with full compression to actually make progress. For the calf pump, that means rising fully onto the toes, achieving complete muscle contraction, not the partial, rolling, lazy contraction of a casual flat walk. Venotonic medications, the supplements and prescription drugs based on compounds like diosmin, hesperidin, and horse chestnut extract, do have a genuine role in the management of chronic venous insufficiency. The research on them is reasonable. They increase the tone of the venous wall, which means the veins distend slightly less under pressure. They reduce some of the inflammatory changes that accumulate around chronically stressed veins. They can decrease the leakiness of capillaries that contributes to swelling, but they do not, in any meaningful way, strengthen the calf muscle. They do not rehabilitate damaged valve leaflets. They do not restore the pumping capacity of the musculovenous pump. In appropriate combination with lifestyle changes and exercise, taken in the right doses for defined periods as part of a comprehensive approach, they can be a useful support. As the only intervention someone relies on, as the capsule someone takes in the morning while sitting at a desk for 8 hours and considers that to be doing something for my veins, they are almost completely insufficient. Compression stockings are the most nuanced of all the common interventions because they actually do interact with the pump in a meaningful way, unlike everything else we've discussed. When a properly fitted compression garment exerts graduated pressure on the lower leg, it reduces the diameter of the veins. Narrower veins mean that when the calf muscle does contract, it generates higher pressure for the same muscular effort, pushing blood upward more effectively. Think of it like squeezing a wider tube versus a narrower tube with the same grip strength. You generate much more output from the narrower tube. So compression genuinely enhances the pump's efficiency on a per-contraction basis. This is real, and it matters. But the critical phrase there is, when the calf muscle does contract. If you put on compression stockings and sit at a desk for 8 hours without doing anything to activate your pump, the stockings are simply preventing the veins from ballooning as severely as they otherwise would. They're slowing the damage. They're not fixing it. And the compression class matters enormously. The gentle, comfortable compression sold as general prevention in most pharmacies, the Class 1 products with light squeeze, often provides insufficient pressure to make any meaningful mechanical difference in someone with established venous insufficiency. Getting the wrong class of compression, either too light to do anything or too strong for your particular situation, is something that needs guidance from a phlebologist, which is the specialist in venous disease. Without that guidance, compression stockings become an expensive way of feeling like you're taking action without actually taking effective action. So here is the picture we've established so far. Your second heart, your calf pump, is the key mechanism. Modern sedentary life systematically disables it. The consequences of long-term pump failure cascade from daily discomfort through progressive valve destruction toward the real possibility of life-threatening events. And the most popular interventions people try, while not entirely useless, all share the same fundamental limitation. They work around the pump rather than working on the pump. They manage symptoms. They temporarily reduce stagnation. They provide some biochemical support. But none of them actually trains and strengthens the musculovenous pump itself. None of them directly addresses the central problem. And the solution, when you understand the biology, is almost offensively simple. To fix the pump, you have to work the pump. You have to give it the kind of rhythmic, full-amplitude contractions it was designed to perform. Not the passive kind you get from lying still with elevated legs. Not the diluted kind you get from shuffling along a flat corridor. The real, complete, deliberate kind, where the calf shortens maximally, holds for a moment, then lengthens fully, over and over, doing the work that through all of human history before the invention of the office chair, it was doing automatically throughout every walking hour of every day. Before we get to the exercises, I want you to do a quick test that will give you an honest picture of where your pump stands right now. Stand up from wherever you're sitting. Find any stable support at roughly waist height, a kitchen counter, a chair back, a desk edge, and lightly rest your fingertips on it. Not gripping, not leaning. Just touching for balance. Now, with your feet hip-width apart and parallel, rise as slowly as you can onto your toes. All the way up, until your heels are as far from the floor as they can get. Hold for 1 second at the top. Then lower back down just as slowly. That's 1 repetition. Your goal is 30 repetitions at that steady, controlled pace, roughly 1 per second. Start counting. If you complete all 30 with your calves burning but your rhythm intact, and you stand down without your legs feeling unusually heavy or swollen, your pump is in reasonably good shape. If you get to 15 or 20 and the calf seizes up with a feeling of intense burning or tightening that forces you to stop, that is your pump telling you clearly, how much capacity it has lost. If after finishing the 30 you stand and your legs feel heavy or hot, or as though blood is throbbing in them, that is stagnation that your pump couldn't clear fast enough during even that brief exertion. And if the next morning your calves are as sore as though you ran 10 kilometers, that is confirmation that those muscles have been doing almost nothing for a very long time and were genuinely shocked by 30 slow repetitions. Whatever your result, what I'm about to describe will work for you. It's designed to meet the pump where it is, not to impose sudden maximum effort that overwhelms a system that's been dormant, but to gradually, systematically build capacity in a way the body can absorb and adapt to without injury or overload. The protocol I'm going to walk you through takes 2 weeks to fully implement, and I want to explain exactly why it's structured the way it is before we go through the movements themselves. The calf muscle, like any muscle that has been underused for years, will respond to sudden heavy loading not with graceful adaptation, but with acute soreness, inflammation, and the kind of pain that makes people stop. The goal of the first few days is not to work hard. The goal of the first few days is to signal to the neuromuscular system that this muscle is being called back into service, to restart the pathways of blood supply and nerve activation that have been largely dormant, to wake up the tissue gently so that when the real work begins, the architecture is ready to receive it. Days 1 through 3, your only task is this. Slow, controlled calf raises at a support, 15 repetitions per set, 4 sets spread across the day, minimum 2 hours between sets. The slow part is non-negotiable, and here is exactly why. When you do fast calf raises, bouncing up and down at speed, you're not primarily working the muscle. You're using the elastic recoil of the Achilles tendon, which stores and releases energy like a spring, doing most of the mechanical work for you. Your muscle barely needs to contract. For our purposes, that Achilles spring is the enemy. We need the muscle to do the work. Rising slowly on a count of 2, pausing at the top, descending slowly on a count of 3, eliminates the spring contribution and forces the calf to generate genuine muscular effort throughout the entire range of motion. This is what trains the pump. 4 sets a day spread at 2-hour intervals sounds like it demands discipline and planning. But the insight here is to stop thinking of these as exercise sets and start thinking of them as behaviors attached to things you're already doing. The first set happens while your morning coffee brews. You're already standing at the counter waiting. Your hand is already at counter height. You don't need to change clothes or find a gym or set up equipment. You just do 15 slow raises while you wait for the coffee, which takes about 40 seconds, and then your coffee is ready and you drink it. The second set happens at a bathroom sink, mid-morning or at lunch, while you wash your hands. The sink is the support. You're already there. Or 15 raises, 40 seconds. The third happens after lunch at any wall or piece of furniture. The fourth happens in the evening while you brush your teeth. You brush for 2 minutes. The 15 raises are done inside the first 40 seconds of that 2 minutes. You've effectively done your daily protocol without carving out a single extra minute of your day, because each set has been attached to a transition you were already making. By the end of day 3, you'll notice your calves are slightly more aware of themselves. There may be mild soreness, the kind that reminds you that you've used a muscle that hadn't been truly used in some time. This is right. This is the tissue reactivating. By day 3, most people find this normalizes, and day 4 feels easier than day 2 did. On day 4, you add the second movement, and this one is specifically engineered for the hours when you're trapped in a chair. It works sitting down, in any clothes, with no equipment, in complete silence. Colleagues in the next room have no idea you're doing it. Sit with your back straight and your feet flat on the floor, knees at a right angle. Now raise both heels simultaneously as high as they'll go without your toes leaving the floor. Hold for 1 second. Lower. Then, without pausing, raise both toes as high as they'll go without your heels leaving the floor. Hold for 1 second. Lower. That's 1 cycle. 20 cycles in a row takes about 40 seconds. You repeat this every 45 minutes of sitting work. The reasoning behind every 45 minutes is precise. Research on venous hemodynamics shows that significant stagnation in the deep veins of the lower leg begins to develop at around the 40 to 50 minute mark of uninterrupted sitting. Before that point, There's some residual circulation still moving things along. After that point, the stagnation has established itself, and you're not just preventing accumulation, you're working against something that's already there. By intervening at 45 minutes, you stay permanently just ahead of the stagnation threshold. You never let the pool form. It's the difference between keeping a clean kitchen by wiping the counter after each use versus waiting until the end of the week and facing a much larger cleaning job. Both approaches technically result in a clean kitchen eventually, but one of them means you never live in mess. There's a deeper reason why this second movement specifically targets the soleus, the deeper calf muscle, the one that's most directly embedded among the venous structures of the lower leg. The gastrocnemius, which is the more superficial calf muscle, the one you see when someone has visually defined calves, is primarily active during walking and standing. The soleus, which lies underneath it, is the postural muscle. It's the one that's active even when you're sitting relatively still, the one that's supposed to be providing a low-level but consistent venous pumping action even during periods of relative rest. In people who've had years of sedentary lifestyle, the soleus tends to have lost significant tone and responsiveness. By specifically targeting the heel raise component of this movement, you're retraining precisely the muscle that is most responsible for keeping blood moving during the long sedentary portions of a modern day. On day 8, you add the third movement, and this is the one that operates on a fundamentally different level from the first two. While the calf raises and seated pump work primarily on the musculovenous pump, this third movement simultaneously engages what physiologists call the respiratory pump, and the effect of the two systems working together is significantly greater than either working alone. Walk on your toes. Rise fully onto the balls of your feet so that your heels never touch the ground, and then walk normally in that position through whatever space you have available. A hallway, a room, a corridor. If you have no space, do it in place, shifting weight rhythmically from one foot to the other, always on the toes. 3 minutes, once a day, in the morning if possible. The breathing element is what makes this transformational, rather than merely useful. As you walk, synchronize your breath in a specific pattern. Inhale slowly through your nose for 2 steps, then exhale slowly through gently pursed lips for 4 steps. The exhale is twice as long as the inhale, and it's against slight resistance from the lip position. This sounds like a minor detail. It is not a minor detail. When you create a slow, prolonged exhale against resistance, the mechanical action of the diaphragm, your breathing muscle, changes in a way that directly affects venous circulation. The diaphragm acts like a large piston in the central body cavity. During a prolonged, slow exhale, it creates a sustained pressure differential that literally pulls venous blood upward from the lower body toward the heart. This is the respiratory pump, distinct from the musculovenous pump in the calves, but designed by evolution to work in concert with it. When you walk briskly in nature, as humans did for essentially the entire history of the species before the industrial era, both pumps run simultaneously. The calves push blood up from below in muscular pulses, and the diaphragm creates a sustained suction that draws it upward from above. The combination produces venous return that is several times more effective than either mechanism alone. Modern walking, which is mostly slow and horizontal and accompanied by shallow breathing, rarely engages both pumps at once to their full potential. These 3 minutes of toe walking with synchronized breathing recreates that ancestral circulatory state, briefly but completely, every single day. There are things that can multiply or undermine all of this work, and I want to cover them because some of them are things you can change today with almost no effort, and their effect on venous circulation is underappreciated. The first is hydration, but not in the vague general sense of drink more water. The specific mechanism matters. Blood is not a simple liquid. It's a suspension of cells and proteins in a water-based medium, and its viscosity, its thickness, changes meaningfully depending on how hydrated you are. When you're even mildly dehydrated, not severely thirsty, just in the low-level chronic underhydration that most working adults live in without realizing it, your blood becomes noticeably thicker. Thicker blood flows more slowly through vessels where the driving pressure is low, which is precisely the situation in leg veins where the pump is already compromised. Thicker blood is also more prone to clotting, and the first blood of the morning, after 6 to 8 hours of breathing and mild perspiration, without any fluid replacement, is the thickest blood of the day. The practical guidance is straightforward. A rough daily baseline for plain water intake is your body weight in kilograms multiplied by 30, giving you milliliters. A 70-kilogram person targets around 2,100 milliliters of plain water, separate from coffee, tea, and food. This is an approximation, not a medical prescription, and it varies with temperature, activity, and diet. But more important than the total is the timing and distribution. 2 full glasses of plain water before anything else in the morning, drunk slowly before coffee or breakfast, addresses the overnight thickening directly, and from there, a glass roughly every 90 minutes to 2 hours throughout the day keeps viscosity steady, rather than allowing it to spike and dip as you load caffeine and forget to drink. Coffee and black tea, as mild diuretics, slightly accelerate fluid loss and count negatively toward your net hydration, which doesn't mean you shouldn't drink them, but it does mean they don't offset your water requirement. Temperature contrast applied specifically to the lower leg is another powerful adjunct. Not a general contrast shower, which is broadly good for circulatory tone, but diluted across too much surface area to have concentrated effect on the calf. Specifically, at the end of your normal shower, direct water flow at your lower leg from foot to knee, covering all surfaces, beginning at a warm and comfortable temperature for 30 seconds per leg, then switching to cool, not ice cold but genuinely cool tap water for another 30 seconds per leg, 3 complete cycles, always ending on the cool side. The total time is under 4 minutes. What this does is repeatedly dilate and then constrict the superficial venous network of the lower leg. The thermal expansion and contraction forces blood in and then out of these vessels in a rapid, repeated cycle that trains the vascular wall to respond more dynamically to changing conditions. After 2 weeks of this, the superficial veins become more tonically responsive, and this improved surface reactivity translates into better support for the deeper venous pumping system. On the question of magnesium for cramps, the detail that matters most and is almost universally ignored is the form of magnesium. Magnesium oxide, which is in the majority of cheap magnesium supplements sold in pharmacies and supermarkets, has poor bioavailability. Most of it passes through the digestive tract without being absorbed, and its primary physiological effect ends up being a mild laxative action. It reaches your muscle in negligible quantities. Magnesium citrate, magnesium glycinate, and magnesium malate are the 3 forms that absorb meaningfully and actually reach the muscle tissue where cramping originates. The target is 300 to 400 milligrams of elemental magnesium per day, which is a specific number on the label that you need to find, because the total weight of the compound and the elemental magnesium content within it are very different numbers, and many products obscure this. The timing is evening, 1 to 1.5 hours before sleep, because the problem you're addressing is a nighttime problem, and you need the magnesium to have absorbed and distributed into the muscle before you lie down. And the minimum duration for any real effect on chronic cramps is 6 to 8 weeks, because magnesium saturation in muscle tissue builds gradually. Anyone who tried magnesium for a week and decided it didn't work was not wrong. They were just evaluating at completely the wrong timescale. Footwear deserves a focused conversation because it affects every single step you take, and therefore has a continuous background influence on how well your calf pump functions throughout the day. The well-known problem with high heels is that they hold the calf in a permanently shortened position. Sustained shortening, 8 hours a day, trains the muscle and tendon toward a contracted resting state. Over years, the muscle loses its full range of motion, and a calf that can't fully lengthen cannot achieve the full contraction to relaxation cycle that makes the pump effective. The damage here is progressive and largely irreversible without deliberate stretching intervention. What's less discussed is that completely flat, rigid-soled footwear, the ballet flats and hard-soled casual shoes that many people choose as their alternative to heels, is also suboptimal for pump function. The human foot has a natural arch, and that arch is designed to flex and rebound with each step. That flexion is part of the mechanical chain that activates calf contraction. In a completely flat, stiff shoe, the arch can't move. The foot rolls through its stride mechanically, and the calf gets a truncated, incomplete activation signal with each step. The ideal is a small heel of 1 to 5 centimeters, paired with a genuinely flexible sole that bends easily at the ball of the foot. You can check any shoe by trying to fold it in half in your hands. If it bends without resistance, it will allow your foot and calf to move naturally. If it resists bending, it's working against your pump with every step. To know whether any of this is working, you need metrics that are honest, because the intuitive ones that people usually use, how the legs look in the mirror, how they subjectively feel, are either too slow changing or too variable to give you reliable feedback. The three measurements I recommend require only a soft tape measure and awareness of your own sensations. First, measure the circumference of your calf at its widest point each morning immediately after waking, before walking around, and again each evening before bed. The difference between these two measurements is the amount of fluid that accumulated in your lower leg during the day and wasn't cleared by your pump. A healthy pump keeps this difference at 0 to a few millimeters. A compromised pump produces differences of 5 millimeters and above. Mark the exact measurement point. 4 fingers below the kneecap works consistently, and use it every time. Second, test capillary refill time in the big toenail. Pinch the nail firmly between 2 fingers for 2 seconds, then release and count how many seconds it takes for the normal pink color to fully return. Under 2 seconds is healthy. 3 to 5 seconds indicates sluggish peripheral circulation. Over 5 seconds is cause for a conversation with a vascular specialist. This test changes relatively quickly with the protocol, often showing improvement within 2 weeks, making it an early and encouraging indicator that the work is paying off. Third, time how long you can sit without developing the heavy, foreign leg sensation. Once a week, the same day each week, sit at a table and work without getting up, noting the first moment that uncomfortable heaviness or pressure begins in your legs. Most people with impaired pumps hit this within 30 to 40 minutes. The goal of the protocol is to push this time progressively outward, past an hour, past 90 minutes, to the point where you stand after 2 hours of sitting and your legs feel completely normal. These 3 numbers, the swelling delta in millimeters, the refill time in seconds, and the sitting tolerance in minutes, are leading indicators. They will change before your legs look different in the mirror. They will change before you consciously notice a difference in daily feel. They are the early signal, the confirmation that what you're doing is working before the final results become visible. Recording them today, as your baseline, and comparing week by week is what distinguishes measured progress from hopeful guessing. Everything we've covered comes down to one central truth. You have a second heart. It has been getting progressively weaker, in most cases for years, not because of anything you've done wrong, not through any failure of character or discipline, but because the physical demands of modern daily life, the hours of sitting at desks and in cars and on sofas that define contemporary adult existence, are genuinely incompatible with the biological requirements of the cardiovascular structure in your lower legs. The system was built for a life of near constant movement, the kind of movement that was inescapable for essentially all of human history until about 70 years ago. It was not built for 8 hours of motionless desk work, followed by a commute, followed by a sofa. No amount of wanting to be healthy compensates for that structural mismatch, because wanting doesn't contract the calf muscle, but 40 seconds does. 4 times a day, 40 seconds each, attached to things you already do. Plus a minute of seated heel and toe raises every 45 minutes of desk work, plus 3 minutes of toe walking in the morning with controlled breathing, plus 2 glasses of water before coffee. That is the full protocol. It is not a dramatic life overhaul. It does not require a gym membership or a personal trainer or a single piece of equipment. It requires understanding, which you now have, and a decision to begin, which only you can make. What changes in 2 weeks is real. Nighttime cramps reduce or disappear because the muscle is no longer accumulating the metabolic debris of daily oxygen deprivation. The sock elastic mark fades or stops appearing because the pump is clearing the daily fluid load. The first steps after sitting feel like your own legs again, because you've been activating the pump throughout the sitting period, and stagnation hasn't had the chance to build. The calf feels firmer to the touch, because a muscle that is actually working is a muscle that is responding, adapting, growing stronger. What changes in 2 months is deeper. The valves are no longer under the unrelenting pressure they've been under for years. The progressive stretching that was causing the slow-motion valve failure we described earlier has slowed or stopped. The conditions that favor clot formation in stagnant venous blood have improved. The efficiency with which oxygenated blood reaches your brain, your heart, your extremities has measurably improved because the return circulation that feeds those delivery systems is working better. This is not a metaphor. This is physiology. These changes are measurable, they are real, and they begin within days of consistent pump activation. You have carried these legs with you for your entire life. They have been there for every significant thing you've ever done, every place you've ever gone, every person you've ever walked toward. They have done this without complaint or attention while you focused on everything else. And now you know something about them that most people never learn, that there is a second heart inside them, that it has been waiting to be used, and that giving it 40 seconds 4 times a day is enough to begin bringing it back to life. Begin tonight. Stand up from wherever you are right now, find a support at counter height, and do 15 slow, complete calf raises. Tomorrow morning, while the coffee brews, do 15 more. That is day 1. Day 1 is already enough. The rest follows from that, 1 day at a time, 1 set at a time, with the patience that real physiological change requires and the consistency that these numbers, your numbers, will confirm is working. Take care of yourself, because no one else can take care of your second heart.